Hey everyone, welcome to our Beyond the Pulpit podcast. We are so excited to be able to have conversations about those things you wouldn't talk about on a Sunday morning, whether it's because, you don't have enough time or, hey, it's a little controversial, it's a little uncomfortable. Well, here we are again, episode 9. Yes, we are at episode 9 of Beyond the Pulpit. We are so incredibly excited to have Joe Butler with us from Ability Tree. And for many people who may not know, we are now in partnership, Life Church, along with your organization, Ability Tree, creating a ministry here at Life Church to help families that are impacted by disabilities. And so we're incredibly excited about that. But before we go any further about all that kind of good stuff, just want to hear a little bit about your story and about Ability Tree. But welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor John. So good to be here. And Pastor Andrea.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, we're so excited to be here and partnering with you guys to come alongside families impacted by disability. So little about myself and my family. My wife and I have been married 27 years. Wow. And we got 3 kids.
And you still have all your hair?
Still have all my hair. We got married when we were 7. And we've been married, have 3 kids, and 26, 23, 20. And so our journey kind of with disability, our journey as parents changed about 23 years ago when our son Micah was born. And I just moved back into housing on the campus of a Christian college to pursue pastoral ministry. And Micah was born the week we moved, and typical birth. He was our second child, and I did the moving. My wife did the birthing, and she had the harder part.
Week.
It was a big week, and I started school full time, started working. And about 9 months later, Micah was diagnosed with developmental delays. Just meant he wasn't developing like a typical 9-month-old. Mm-hmm. There's milestones. If you're a parent, you know what those are. Just to, when you should talk, when you should walk, use fine and gross motor skills. And so he was delayed in all of those.
And he's your youngest, right?
He's our middle child.
Middle. So you already had a child before, so you even knew more. Yeah. Hey, this is what our oldest child, the milestones she met, so forth and so on.
Yep. And Hannah, our oldest, had met, she was typically developing, met all the milestones. So we're like, hey, this is how it should go. And my wife kind of felt like something was wrong, wasn't sure exactly. But she sensed that as a mom before I did. I was going to school, I was working. She had the harder job, stay-at-home mom, caregiving for a 2.5-year-old and a newborn. And so that's really when our life totally changed. Mm-hmm. And, we had no prior experience in raising a child with disability or special needs. We loved Micah and got to know him. And that started kind of our journey of disability.
Well, so then walk us through how Ability Tree kind of was birthed out of, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And the name as well.
And the name, yeah. So, we it was 3.5 years on the college campus, graduated, took a pastorate down in South Jersey, and we were associate pastors in charge of youth and everything the lead pastor told us to do. and so Micah started walking couple months after we took the pastorate. And families would come to us. We had families in the church of children with Down syndrome or, autism and who were visually impaired, things like that, who looked to us for support as being, parents of a child with disability, but also being in leadership. And over the next few years, God just spoke to us about, coming alongside other families like our own. And that really started through Micah's disability, and he was the avenue that God used to really call us. And so God again spoke to my wife kind of first on that and said something new is coming, change is coming. And so in August of 2008, we stepped down from our pastorate and started traveling around the United States, just helping churches better welcome and include people with disability, really sharing our story. Yeah. Just saying, hey, this is how disability impacts our family. And at that time we had 3 kids. So, just really traveling around and we went, all around the country. We got invited to come and speak in Northwest Arkansas at a church and share our story there. And while we were there, I was shared in 2 services, and kind of the second service, God just put a vision of a disability outreach center on my heart. And I started sharing things that I wasn't in my notes and like, hey, this is going to provide rest for families and expand around the country. And my wife is looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And the pastor's like, yes, Lord, we'll do it. And the missions pastor stands up, we'll do it. And then afterwards, a businessman came to me. He's like, what are you seeing? And I said, just rest just keeps coming, rest and recreation, education, support, and training. Didn't have a name. So we're in Arkansas, never been to Arkansas. It's kind of like it felt like a foreign land to us coming from New Jersey. And we went back home to New Jersey, and a few days later, the pastor called and said, hey, I think you're supposed to move out here and start that disability outreach center. Wow. And my wife and I prayed, and we said, well, if we're going to do this, like, we've got to come up with a name. And so we wanted to focus on abilities because everybody has abilities. And then my wife loves trees. But the symbolism in trees, just the change in season, the root structure that's needed, the nutrients, the change in seasons that families go through, and every family goes through changes in seasons. And but with a neurotypical child, they go through those milestones. When you have a neurodiverse or non-neurotypical child, they don't go through those normal milestones. So those seasons can be longer. The winter may be longer than the spring or the summer, That's good. And, but we just came up with the name and prayed about it. And 9 months later, we left New Jersey and we moved to Arkansas, and the pastor's brother-in-law had a 4-bedroom house that was available for rent, no money down, moved in, and cost of living was about a third of what it was in New Jersey. And so for a missionary family, I mean, that's how we started. That's incredible.
I love the ability tree. I love just the heart behind the logo, because I mean, I see your logo all over the place, but I love that how you explained it. And I love that the fact that you focus on the abilities, people's ability versus, what we tend to do is focus on the disability, but you really focus on the person first and what they can do. So I love that.
And disability is not a bad word, and we get hung up sometimes on that. But it should never define a person. It's a part of who they are. And some people want to be identified as a disabled person, but most people, they want to be just called by name. And even if it is a person with a disability, they still have gifts and talents, and they're a welcome part of the body of Christ. And so, we wanted to focus on abilities. And even though we get mistaken for a tree company a lot of times,
like, hey, can you come cut a tree down in my backyard?
That's actually
we get magazines
really funny.
with equipment all the time, and so
it could be a side business to produce some income.
Yeah.
One of the things for us as Life Church, 34, going to be 35 years old as a church is, our vision is love God, love people, do something. And so as we prepared for this year and God gave us the vision for 2024, dropped it in our hearts, the God word was re-engineer. And when you really unpack that, and we're going to talk about that in a different podcast, the re-engineer soon, but when you unpack that, it's really not starting something new. Right. It's really taking what once was and repackaging it, breathing life back into it, or improving it or making it more influential, more impactful. And so one of the things as we unpacked the vision was, if we are a church, which we are, that loves God and loves people and does something, are we loving people in the most impactful way possible, right? Are we valuing people the way Jesus would value people? Yeah. And so as we talk through that and process through that, we realize, hey, there are families in our communities that we aren't reaching as effectively and efficiently and impactfully. Is impactfully a word? Okay. Yeah. It's a word now. Impactfully as we could. And families like the ones we're talking about, those that are impacted by disability. And one of the things that's so incredibly encouraging is to know that there are organizations like yours that have invested resources, time, money, your life into reaching families and communities and individuals that many times feel unseen. And that you've been here with us all weekend, training our staff and then training our volunteers and looking at our locations and going to help us and are partnering with us to create this atmosphere and create this place. It's a safe place. But one of the things that were really powerful that you've said, you and Janelle, which we gave her a promotion this weekend. She's now like the global consulting director, or maybe the president now of Ability Tree, global
consulting.
president. Yeah. She's president of the consulting arm, so, but she talked about how important it is for families to be seen.
Yeah.
Right. And I love that. And could you unpack that a little bit for us? As a family, as a father who has a child that's with disability, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I think, for me, when Micah was diagnosed with a disability, when he had the developmental delays, it was something like, hey, he's going to grow out of this and, everything's going to be okay. And then when he had a seizure and they had to sedate him and they ran all the tests and scans and they came back and said, there's abnormalities in your son's brain and we don't know what he'll be like, if he'll walk or talk or be independent one day. That was very, very difficult. I bawled my eyes out and just, I knew that it was going to impact him the rest of his life and impact our family as well. And so, we get misunderstood all the time where we go places and, we don't get as many looks as we used to, what's wrong? Micah doesn't have the inhibitions that most people have, the cares and the worries, which is great, but can also be detrimental sometimes. He doesn't have the fears either. So he'll go up to strangers and things. And most of the time he goes up to the right people because he has received Christ and he does have a, gift of discernment, I believe, because he'll go up to a trucker out of 80 truckers and that trucker will happen to have a daughter with autism and need help in starting a ministry at their church. That's a true story.
That's incredible.
It's in our book. But, it's so, but we can sense it, when we come into a place. A lot of times we're uncomfortable as human beings. We're uncomfortable with the unknown. So if we don't know what to say, what to do, we don't say or do anything. But that can further, by not saying or doing anything, that further marginalizes and excludes individuals. So, it could be cross-cultural. It could be, you don't know the language to speak, so you don't try to speak it. Well, when it comes to disability, you're not sure the language to speak, so you don't want to say the wrong thing or offend the person. Really, all families like ours want is to be treated like a family, like an individual,
That's so good.
And just welcome them like you would anyone else. I'll come up, I'll be at Walmart or a store somewhere, or truck stop and restaurant. And, this one particular time spoke with a young adult who was in a wheelchair. But I didn't know if he was used words or not. So I started talking to him and almost immediately he looked at me, but almost immediately his I assume his mother, his caregiver, started talking on his behalf. But I addressed him and I talked to him because I wanted to honor him as an individual, as a person made in the image of God, and give him respect. But if a person can't communicate verbally, they're going to either communicate through a device or, a talk board, or they're going to have someone there to talk on their behalf. And so as a father, I just, I think for Micah's 23 now. So Micah talks, he walks. He's going to need somebody to care for him the rest of his life. He can't be left alone. He can go up into his room for a couple hours and pray and worship and, watch sports, whatever, or go in the backyard, but we can't leave him at home alone. But, he'll tell us sometimes so-and-so was mean or, he's sad, but that's about the extent of that he can communicate his emotions. But he is, it's like it's like water running off the back of a duck for him. If somebody calls him a name, which has happened when he was younger, and, our girls would tell us, and so-and-so called Micah a name, and I told him they should never call him that, and our youngest is the kind that would, our oldest is a second mom. Hannah's a second mom to Micah, and she's motherly. Our youngest, Hannah would give a lecture if somebody, did something wrong to Micah. Clara would just pop him in the nose. Our youngest, she's just like, action.
That must be a youngest type of thing.
A little more scrappy, right?
A little more scrappy.
Yeah,
And she
our
didn't,
daughter's like that too.
Yeah, and she didn't see all that Micah went through. But as a father, I think it's harder because it's harder to let it roll off my back. It affects it, and it's a blessing that Micah lets it go and doesn't hold on to it and get bitter. And that's a challenge as a parent. You have to not hold on to that and not become bitter with the world or with people or the church. You have to realize that it's human nature, and it's unfortunately ignorant sometimes.
Yeah.
It's 23 years ago, I had no clue what it was like being a father of a child with disability. But now I realize that, Micah he's a child, first of all. He's a reward from the Lord. Psalm 127:3. He was formed, God knew him before he formed him in his mother's womb. He's fearfully and wonderfully made. I see his likes, dislikes, his talents. I know him relationally. But when we don't take the time to get to know someone who has a disability relationally, we don't see them as human almost. And so that we kind of put that up like they're different than us, and we don't become vulnerable. We don't risk saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing in order to build that relationship. But so I would just say, to individuals out there, to pastors, leaders, parents, people, don't be afraid to talk to a person with a disability, because it doesn't just impact that individual, it impacts the whole family, the mom, the dad, the siblings. And when you treat someone, when you love someone and treat them honorably and as a human being with human needs and as an individual, then you're not only blessing them, but you're blessing their family as well.
Yeah. There was a statistic that I can't remember if you shared it or Janelle shared it, but it was specifically around pastors were surveyed on how welcoming
perception versus reality.
Perception versus reality. How welcoming their church was to all people, to those impacted by disability, so forth and so on. I think it was 90% or 90% plus said, yep, our church is 99%, even, okay. 99% said, yep, people think my church is welcoming. I mean, I think we would say that, and we absolutely would say that. But then it was somewhere a lot lower. I think it was let me rephrase that. It was 80% of or plus of families, when asked, said they did not feel welcomed in churches.
Yes.
So 99% of churches, leaders, pastors said, nope, my church is welcoming. 80-something% said, oh, no. My perception or my reality or my experience wasn't.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit from more of a personal, like some of the experiences you've had that sort of fuel your fire to help churches like ours to become a place to make Jesus accessible for others. I'm pointing at your sweatshirt.
Yeah. Well, and you're correct on that. 99% of pastors and 86.5% of families, 99% of pastors said, yes, families feel welcome here. 86.5% of those families impacted by disability said our church needs more awareness and more training because we don't feel that welcomed here.
Wow.
And I'll take you back to, I shared a story when I was in Bible school. We were trying to find a local church, and Micah was 2, this would have been when he was, he was 3.5 when we graduated. So up until his, 3.5 years old. And we settled on the third church we went to. And, one of the instances we would take him, at 2 years old, he should have been in the toddler class, and we would take him to the toddler class, but then they would go outside to the playground or whatever. And Jen would go to pick him up and he's not there. They left him in the nursery. And and simply because he couldn't walk, but he had a walker. So, if he had a one-on-one with him to take him out, then, but it wasn't communicated to us that he wasn't going to stay with them. They just assumed that, hey, he's not walking, so we're just going to leave him in here on a mat, and it wasn't communicated well, then another church that we were at, this is later, had a midweek service on Wednesday night. Our 2 girls could go, but they said Micah couldn't go because they couldn't provide a one-on-one for him. And so that meant we couldn't go. So, and we didn't want to go. Our attitude was like, we don't want to go to this
Well,
church.
forget it now.
Our girls had friends there, but we couldn't go to midweek service because we couldn't drop him off. And so, just things like that where it really, for us, this was our 24/7 job, and he wasn't he didn't have behavior problems. It was more intellectual, cognitive, and physical disabilities when he was younger, and very happy-go-lucky kid. But the church just didn't, know what to do, and they just assumed, I think, that this is your child, so it's your responsibility, and he is, but the church should be a place of community. The church should be a place of rest, and we shared this weekend. Disability ministry or inclusion ministry, when is no longer optional, it's essential, because 20% on average, 20% of our communities are impacted by disability, every age, every ethnicity, every socioeconomic class. So if you're not intentionally welcoming and including people with disability, you're basically saying, 20% of our community we don't really care about whether they can get into our church or how they feel. And that's where I think the perception versus reality is, we've got accessible parking and we've got a, ramp, but are your greeters, does your welcome team know how to welcome and include and greet someone? Do you have, sensory tools? Do you have headphones available? Do you have quiet areas? Have you thought about, the process? You don't have to be perfect, but being prepared, just like we prepare for first-time visitors or youth or whatever it might be. It's just taking that time. And it's 2024, right?
I love what you said. You said we don't have to be perfect, but you have to be prepared. Right? How many times have we gone to someone's home and maybe, we're not talking a mansion, we're not talking this bougie place. It's just this small little apartment, with simple furnishings, but they were prepared for you to come. Right?
It's a whole
and you
different
walk
feel.
away and it's a whole different feel. And I think we talked about this morning, right? With the volunteers, which was, we may not have all the resources and all the elevators and all these things set up for day one, but our hearts can be ready.
Right.
How we love those that come through our doors. We don't need fancy things to do that, to do that well.
Right. Yeah. And awareness, right? Being aware. I think also it's super important to self-reflect. Because I think, to the point we were just talking about, perception versus reality, I think a lot of people are like, no, I'm welcoming or whatnot. But they may just be, a little behind the times in language, in identifying, right? I love how we talked about it's the person first. We, you said that you wanted to be, see us as a family. Just see us as mom, dad, and 3 kids, and we're coming to church, and just meet us where we are. You may not be able to do everything, but just try something, or just say, just love us. Just welcome us and love us where we are. So I have a question about, going back to the ability tree, that's how we know how kind of it got started and why you've birthed it. So talk to us a little bit about, you come alongside churches, you partner with churches to help provide training and awareness. Can you talk a little bit more about what else does Ability Tree do? So you have the couple branches of Ability Tree. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So we come alongside families impacted by disability by providing R.E.S.T. So recreation, education, support, and training. And really, we're one mission 2 branches. And so we have our consulting branch, which comes alongside the local church to help make Jesus accessible through training and awareness and consulting. And then our community branches, which comes alongside families to make community possible for them in the local community. So, just as a family impacted by disability, again, it doesn't just impact Micah, it impacts Jen and Hannah and Clara and myself.
Yeah.
So, creating community for them, creating environments where they can make friends, and have a place to go. And we built a state-of-the-art facility in Northwest Arkansas in 2020, 7 weeks before COVID, and it's still there, and it's still doing good. It's thriving. Awesome. But originally we were in a 4,000 square foot historic building in downtown Siloam Springs. It was donated to us by Hobby Lobby, and it was a blessing. We made it work. We made it work because we had the right heart. And families. We were a family impacted. New families would come in, and it was brick on the walls and plaster falling off on some of it. We put padding up and we sealed the walls, and we had mega blocks at first, and then we got the vinyl blocks, but we made it work, and we grew out of that, and we built that new facility, and our vision really is just to expand nationally and globally, because disability, again, impacts every community here in the United States. There's 1 billion with a B people impacted by disability around the globe.
It's crazy.
We just had an opportunity a few weeks ago to do a training for 200 plus children's workers in Asia Pacific. And
that's incredible.
Just amazing to see. I've had the opportunity to go with my oldest daughter to Uganda and Ghana and run some camps over there and do some training in Argentina, which was amazing. And so the need is everywhere. The need is great. And so kind of our vision is just to see, to plant more community branches and to expand our consulting branch globally to just come alongside the local church. We think the local church is positioned to really meet the need of people with disability. And we've been on the sidelines for too long. I've got my MA in disability studies through Cal Baptist, and learned that, before 1975, kids like my son didn't have a right to a free public education.
It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just...
1 out of 5, children with intellectual disabilities were educated. 4 were turned away. And I was 2 years old in 1975, so it wasn't that long ago.
No,
I know. Wasn't at all.
No. And so it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. My mom remembers seeing kids with disability kept inside.
Institutionalized.
And so many, we met families this weekend that had adults with disability. When they were born, they were told to put their child in an institution.
Yeah.
This is
here
America.
Here in the Allentown area, right? There was, these
Allentown State
Hospital, which was filled with those with disabilities that in modern time, like where we're at now, you would hope we would never think to do that. It's incredible. It's encouraging that culture, at least on this side of the planet, has improved and are valuing people more. And whether we know it or not, we're starting to walk and talk and behave more like Jesus and how Jesus would behave and treat people. But I'm sorry. It's just astonishing that every time I hear you say that or someone else say that, it's like, that's 1970. It wasn't even that long ago.
I know. Yeah. And through our community branches, we include siblings as well because of the impact, of them. So they get to meet boys and girls, others that have siblings, similar journey as them. And so, again, creating that community, and in one way, just with the attitude, if a family comes in, a parent, sometimes they just want to talk, they just want to talk. And while their child is, in a program, and they just need time to talk to another adult because they've been caregiving, for 24/7, and they need that respite. They need that temporary rest.
Yeah. So how many community branches do you currently have?
We currently have 4.
4.
Yes.
And go ahead.
What does a community branch mean? Like, so, or is it a place? Is it
Sure.
as you're doing that, tell us a little bit about that as well.
So it's really a beyond Sunday, outreach facility. And so our state-of-the-art rest center, our community branch in Arkansas is 16,000 square foot, indoor, outdoor sensory space. And so that's used Monday through Saturday, day and after school programming for preschool age all the way to adults. And so some of our branches in New Jersey, Ability Tree First Coast, in the First Coast of Florida, and then Treasure Coast in Southeast Coast of Florida are either mobile or we're renting spaces or using spaces. We're planting Ability Tree Treasure Coast. We're planting Ability Tree Twin Cities, and those are up in Minnesota. So that's in partnership with River Valley Church. Christ Fellowship Church down in Southeast Florida is heavily involved with our Treasure Coast branch. And so, we're really just dreaming about different, models of ministry too, where we can come alongside the church and help the church come alongside families, and looking at, we've talked a little bit about our partnership and how that could look, with a community branch model here, and going beyond Sunday, meaning, that Monday through Saturday, providing respite, providing support for families. Just it is to keep marriages together, to keep families together, to minister to siblings and help them know that they're seen, and find a place of community beyond just Sunday. Sunday is very important, but the community branches are, it's kind of like a mix of a therapy facility with all the play equipment, but we don't do, occupational speech or physical therapy there. They just come and play. So it's kind of organized chaos a little bit. It's open rec, really. There's some organized rec, but they've been in school. Most of these kids coming after school, they get dropped off, like in Arkansas, they get dropped off the bus. We don't have it scheduled out where they're tutored or they're doing this. It's playtime. It's playtime. They're buddied up and they rotate in the different rooms and stuff, but they've already had that, instruction from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and they're just wanting to play, and then the siblings get to come to a fun place. One of the things that was difficult as a family as well was when Micah started his therapy. Hannah our oldest was 2.5, and then Clara wasn't born until later. But Hannah would witness Micah, therapists come into our house, and we would be going to therapy facilities and doctor's offices. And she asked my wife, when do I start my therapy? And Jen's like, well, you don't need therapy, honey. You know how to walk and talk. And but Jen would talk to the therapists that would come to our house and say, hey, can you involve Hannah in some way? And we realized that a lot of the time and resources are allocated to the child with disability. So oftentimes the siblings are left out. They feel they can feel left out. They can have ill feelings towards their siblings with disability and feel like, I never get time with mom and dad because they're always, so Ability Tree is a fun place, a safe place where they can come and play. They get invited to come and play. So it's not a really doctor's office. It's not a therapy visit. They're just coming and play, and they can be, a kid and meet others that understand what their life's like.
That's incredible.
There was I don't know if you know the statistic, but you triggered something when you said, help people in their marriages, minister to those marriages. Do we know, or do you know off the top of your head, statistically, how many marriages end in divorce because of, trying to raise a child or a family member with impacted by a disability?
Yeah. So there were some stats out there that kind of were thrown out, and there was an 80% stat that was just, it was talked about on national television and sitcoms even, and then it was dispelled a little bit, but I know that some of the peer reviewed journals and statistics that are out there say that a marriage that produces a child with disability has a higher percentage of ending in divorce than one that doesn't. So there's a higher percentage. It's hard to pinpoint what that is. But again, because of the time and the resources, I mean, financial reasons are the number one reason for divorce. So you add in medical expenses, additional medical expenses, and respite care, and all that, and just parenting. Two different views maybe on how you should raise your child with disability. So there's more. There can be more stress now. A marriage that produces a child with disability can bring the family together too. Like for us, it's become our family mission. But it doesn't mean it's not difficult. It's not challenging. It's not stressful. It's just managing that. And without Christ, without our relationship with Christ, and without being a part of a healthy local church, it would be very, very difficult. There's just, I don't know how families do it without, the support of the local church and faith community.
Yeah.
Following up on, this marriages and ending in divorce. And I can just imagine the challenges. It's hard enough raising kids.
Yeah.
And then for those families that are impacted by disability, my heart goes out. And so you guys have been married 26, 27 years. What was it?
27.
27 years. 27 years. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy 27 years, especially the last 23.
Yeah.
And so can you tell, just briefly, for those families that are watching or listening that are impacted by disability, what were you able to do to stay married and maintain a healthy marriage that maybe could help them in their relationships?
Yeah. Yeah. Early on, it was totally different journey for my wife than for me. I shared that where I'd gone back to school. I got to go to school full time. I worked a couple of jobs, pulled all-nighters. But Jem was caregiving for a 2.5-year-old and a newborn, a 9-month-old with special needs. And there were times where she just wanted to leave. Later, she didn't tell me at the time, but she was looking for a way out. How can I get out of it? This is too hard, and because there were no other families that understood. The church didn't understand. The church would say, why aren't you at women's Bible study on, 10 a.m. Tuesday morning? Well, I can't get there, without some help. But what I would say to families of a child with disability is, keep the communication open, how you are feeling when you need a break. Respite is a fancy word for temporary rest. So make sure you find time to rest. It's maybe difficult for both of you to get away, but allow, your spouse to get away, whether it's for a night.
That's really good.
If you have some great, grandparents, great parents, in-laws, and they're willing to, caregive and watch your child overnight so that you can have a mini, respite with each other, then that's great. Second thing, don't try to fix your child. Don't try to, this is more towards fathers. A lot of times we try to fix things. We try to fix the problems. We hear our spouses saying something and we're like, well, they want a solution to that. We need to solve that for them. And they're saying, no, we just want you to listen to us. And so when it comes to, that mentality, I caught myself trying to fix the problem, and Micah's not a problem. Your child's not a problem.
Really
They're
good.
a person to be loved and accepted. And so I'm going to do everything I can to help Micah succeed in life. If there's a therapy, if there's a treatment for him that will help him, yes, I'm going to do that. But learning that, this isn't something you fix. You just love your child and you trust them to the Lord and say, just help me to parent my child in the best way possible. So, because what can happen is, you have one of the parents is trying to fix her child and the other is saying, no, we just need to love them. And that can bring division.
Yeah.
And, it can be, there's a lot of absentee fathers or absentee parents that, pour themselves into their work, late nights, and they're avoiding coming home because they're dreading,
just hard.
It's hard, and that's their respite. And I'd say the third thing is just to see your child as a gift. See your child as a gift,
good.
and it may be hard right now, especially if you're early in the journey, but that's the truth. That Psalm 127:3 says, "Children are a reward from the Lord, a heritage from the Lord," and so they're a gift. And what really helped me through that, when Micah was 2.5 and had a seizure, and had to be taken by ambulance to the hospital, and we got the news delivered by a neurologist who had poor bedside manner, and just said, "Your child has abnormalities in their brain," and next thing you know, I'm just that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And but that week, God spoke to me of Micah being a gift from him, and that he was in control. He had a plan and a purpose through it. And then we had our spiritual emphasis week that week at college, and Matthew 11:28 through 30, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy burdened, I will give you rest." And the words of Jesus just spoke to me. And that's been a theme verse of mine, and just finding that, rest, and realizing that, Micah is a gift.
Yeah,
and,
that's good.
We, at the time, I didn't know what his development was going to be like. And, he did end up walking. He is talking. He's, he's, somewhat independent, and he's 23 years old, and he's happy, and he loves God, and he loves people. And so, just continue to give your child, see your child as a gift, and say, "Lord, help me to steward, my child as they grow. Help me to parent them, and help me to love them." And I pray for Micah's comprehension, understanding every day, and just, pray for God's plan in his life, and that he develops into the person that God wants him to be.
I love that, because, God has a plan for his life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know you guys were talking about in a separate conversation about some stories that line up with that. Did you want to?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure this is your book that you wrote too, right? And I'm sure there's stories in the book as well about Micah, but I want you to
Life with Micah.
It's called Life with Micah.
We'll make sure. Yeah. We'll make sure to put the resources. We'll make sure Pastor Gabe and others put the resource links in the YouTube and so forth and so on, so that people can get the book and other information. So
I want you to tell us two stories. I want to end with a story about Micah and church, and youth group that you shared, because I thought that was so powerful. And then also a story about something from the camp, the ability camp. Yeah. Some story that kind of highlights just their abilities versus looking at their disability. So go ahead.
So a few years ago at our ability camp, which is a 5-day overnight camp for adults with disability, one of my previous professors said, "Hey, we have a family friend who has an adult who's 40 years old with intellectual disabilities, and I think your camp would be great for him." And I said, "Awesome. We'd love to have him come." And her husband wanted to have lunch with me and kind of explain some of his gifts ahead of time. And so we sat down for lunch, and they're like, let's just say his name was Matt. Matt's got some spiritual gifts, and let me share with you, what those are. And they said he had the gift of prophecy and the gift of knowledge, and he would also talk about spaceships, and he would kind of be out there in left field a lot of times. But every time the Spirit of God gave him, a prophetic word or something, it was spot on.
Wow.
And they'd never, it happened a dozen times to them. He'd spoke a word to them. It was always spot on. So he comes to camp, and I always try to meet new campers, and I sat with him at lunch, and he was talking about, Star Trek and spaceships and this and that, and socially awkward and things like that. And then at chapel that night, we had a guest speaker from Arkansas, pastor speaking, and lead pastor to church. And so he came up to me after the service, and he said, "Who's that guy over there?" I said, "Oh, that's one of our campers." He's like, "He's a camper?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "He just came up to me and told me something that was said in our board meeting that I haven't told anybody else, and gave me a word direction and
Oh
knowledge.
my
and,
gosh.
and I was like,
That's so
wow.
cool.
And he said it was spot. He's like, there's no way he could have known because nobody else outside of that board meeting knew. And then I saw, let's say Matt again, I saw him go up to a camper at the altar and just, lay hands on him and pray with them. And then he came to me, the camper came to me and just gave me some encouraging words and kind of read my mail on what I was dealing with and going through and just encouraged me and spoke, encouragement over me and prayed for me. And so it just blew my mind. I mean, we've seen Micah operate in spiritual gifts. We've seen him go up and lay hands on people and several times, and they've shared with us stories of healing afterwards and things.
Amazing.
Micah still has physical disabilities and intellectual disabilities. So, there are no disabled souls. And, 1 Corinthians
really
12:7, 1 Corinthians 12:7 says we all been given a gift for the common good. And that's talking about spiritual gifts. Mm-hmm. So the Spirit of God is not limited by our, spiritual gifts are in operation with human beings. So, the Spirit of God can operate through any human being he wants to.
Yeah.
He operated through a donkey, right?
Yeah.
So like, who are we to think he can't speak through a person who's even non-speaking?
Yeah.
Or speak through a person with intellectual disability. So that was, the next day at lunch, she's back talking about spaceships and, and
That's
stuff in left
awesome.
field.
That's incredible.
But it was just so awesome. It displayed, God's works and God's power.
The awe and wonder of God, right?
Yes.
It just takes you right there. Like, look at God. He's so big and so amazing, but he has this vessel, a vessel who is willing and who is connected and, has a gift, spiritual gift. So I love that. So can you tell us about good church experience
Yes.
with
right.
Micah
Yeah.
and what the church did? And it wasn't necessarily like this grand thing, but just a shift, right?
There's
An
so much
attitudinal
learning
shift.
in this story. There's so much learning and encouragement for those that could be listening or watching.
Sure.
Pastors, leaders, volunteers, church leaders that are going, hey,
How do I even start? Where do I even start?
Right.
This is a great story to end with.
Right. Yeah. So, my wife and I when we were in town at our local church, we were life group leaders and Micah this was when he was in the youth group. He was part of life group, which met twice a month. And so this was one of those twice a month nights that the youth life group met. And so my wife went to the youth pastor after the morning service, said, hey, where are you guys meeting tonight? And he said, well, we're actually taking a bike ride down to the creek and not everybody has a bike, so not everybody's going. And she said, well, this is like one of the main life group nights. And I told Micah about it because we would prep Micah ahead of time for things.
Yeah.
And so she's like, he's going to be really disappointed. And, they kind of had a, conversation about it. And Jen comes up to me, she's like, let's go. And I'm like, what's going on? And on the way home, she's like, yeah, I don't know if Micah can go tonight because they're riding bikes and the youth pastor's not being very accommodating. And I was like, well, let's just pray for him on the way home. And about an hour later, he calls and calls Jen. He said, hey, I've got a youth leader driving a truck behind those riding bikes in case somebody has a flat tire. Would Micah want to ride in the truck? Yes, it's perfect. Ding, ding, ding. It was like, Micah didn't have to ride a bike.
Yeah.
He just wanted to be included with his friends. He just wanted to go to the creek and hang out and be a part of the youth group, the life group. And so that's inclusion.
Yeah.
Inclusion doesn't mean everybody does the same thing. It doesn't mean everybody
That's so
rides a
good.
bike, everybody talks, everybody walks. It just means everybody's included.
Yeah.
So, it's outside the box. It's creative thinking sometimes. And that was, the youth pastor came up with that on his own. But we've got as leaders, if we're in leadership, I mean, we were created by the most creative, God there is. I mean, God created the world. God is, super creative, and he created us with creativity. So like, Lord, help me to figure this out. Help me to be creative and figure out how I can include this individual into the life of our ministry. Cause it's
So
not,
good.
it's not about starting a new ministry. It's about adapting, modifying to include kids, teens, adults in the existing ministries. And so that was a beautiful story.
Yeah, I love that.
Micah loves trucks too, so it worked
It's a
out
win-win.
good. And,
It was a win.
It was
win-win.
elevated experience for him, right?
It was elevated.
It went from
elevated.
no
It made him
experience to
feel
like now
special.
he's riding in the truck.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
And we have a lot of funny stories. We have a lot of, emotional stories in our book,
yeah.
and so it's really written, Life with Micah is written to families of children with disability to say, hey, your child is a gift from God, and finding fulfillment in just parenting a child with disability.
Yeah.
And there's also, at the end, there's a Disability 101 appendix for pastors. So what we're asking is, after you read this book, hand it to your pastor and say, hey, would you, at least read the appendix, if not read the whole thing, but if you read the appendix, you're gonna better understand what life is like for us and how you can include a family like ours.
That's really good.
That's
I love
really
that.
good.
That's a great way to kind of end, right?
Yes.
With a to-do. Next step is read the book, get the book, read the book, and give it to your church leader.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe. We're so grateful for you and for your entire team, for your family. We're grateful for Micah, who's your Chief Inspiration Officer.
That's correct.
And so we're incredibly
the
grateful
best
for
title.
his life.
Yeah.
And for your life and for your wife's life and your entire team's life. And for everyone who's watching or listening, we're excited to be launching at Life Church what we're calling MVP this September, and we'll be building that platform over the next few months. But as you all know, Beyond the Pulpit, it's about having conversations with real people like Joe and Micah and so many others, having real conversations with real people about things we can't always talk about on a Sunday. And so that's episode 9 with Joe Butler from Ability Tree. Make sure you subscribe, you give us some great comments. But that's it. Love you guys.